Congressman, I want to get to what you can't even describe as footsie with white supremacists. It's just all-out association with white supremacists first. What do you do about that?
Well, that's a good question, Nicole. I don't think we have an answer to that yet. I mean, first and foremost, we start off by condemning it, being vocal against it, and saying this is not okay. Because, you know, if you step back, this is not surprising, unfortunately, after what we've seen the last 4 years, that there are members of Congress that are affiliating with radical groups, extremist groups, white national groups. But it's also not okay, and it's not normal. So what we need to do is make sure that this isn't becoming normalized, that we're not accepting this as a regular part of our American political discourse, and we're pushing back on it, while at the same time that we secure the Capitol complex, we secure the government, and we prepare to address violent extremism that's on the rise in America.
I guess what's so shocking about it, even if it isn't surprising, Congressman, is that there is a current threat warning issued by the Department of Homeland Security and the Joint Terrorism Task Force against white supremacists who believe Donald Trump's big lie, some of them also chafing under COVID restrictions. But this has been identified by law enforcement as a current and urgent domestic terror threat, and still furthering their message and not afraid or ashamed of being associated with them.
Well, think about it this way. You know, the best way I've been able to explain this to folks is just imagine your workplace. You know, for your viewers sitting back here, imagine your place of business where you work. Imagine that workplace coming under a violent assault by thousands of people that murdered a police officer, brutally beat 140 others, and tried to kill you and your other colleagues. But then imagine for a second that other colleagues who work with you were actually part of inciting that, furthering it, and then after the fact continue to incite it and even try to bring guns into the workplace, and your employer can't do anything about it, can't fire these folks. That's the situation we're actually in right now. It's very challenging for leadership. It's very challenging in Congress, but we're going to have to figure out a way to deal with it immediately within Congress, but also within the country as well.
Congressman Jonathan Swan here. I think people are really curious to know, like, you're working shoulder to shoulder with your Republican colleagues, and just describe what that's like. You know, a good number of them voted to overturn the results, and you just described some of them. Have you confronted them? Like, what have the interpersonal relationships been like? Because, you know, there used to be, anyway, a certain degree of comity on Capitol Hill. I think people are curious to know what that's like now.
Yeah, so I've come to Congress. I represent almost as many Republicans in my district than I do Democrats. I come from a purple community. I grew up in a Republican family, in a working class family, so I understand this. I understand some of the anxieties and the political debates that go on, and I've come to Congress in good faith to try to help rebuild this and find common ground. And I'm one of the most bipartisan members of Congress, certainly before the 6th, and I'm trying to be so again. But I think we have to understand that not all of my GOP colleagues are the same. I mean, for all the folks that are depraved and saying terrible things and associating themselves with extremist groups, there are a few who are also at great risk, showing courage and standing up and saying enough is enough, and trying to push back. And then, of course, there's a lot that falls somewhere in between on that spectrum. So I'm really dealing with this on a case-by-case basis, trying to develop relationships and have a meeting of the minds with as many people as I can to try to find some path forward here.
Congressman, let me just follow up on Jonathan's question. I think I have two examples of what you're describing. Politico describes Liz Cheney condemning Paul Gosar's comment. I think the organization that Gosar spoke to is one that has expressed views that are clearly racist. This is not the kind of an organization or an event that other members of Congress should be participating in, said Cheney. But then on the other hand, you have Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, who released an ad I will not play on this broadcast, but suffice to say, well, I'll read how it's described. She has this quote in the ad: "It's time to cut the crap, and remember, this is the people's house." Boebert bombastically declares. The video concludes with audio of a gunshot, followed by the sound of a weapon being reloaded and fired again. This toxic mix of racism and glorification of violence makes that comedy that Jonathan's asking about feel impossible.
Yeah, well, it certainly is with people like that. I mean, I try to work with people if I have shared values with them or feel like we can work together and have some meeting of the minds. There are some people that you just can't. I mean, I'm not going to work with folks and normalize that behavior because it's not funny. It's not normal. It's not okay. What we've seen over the last 4 years, and certainly on January 6th, is that words have consequences.
Yeah.
Especially if you're an elected official, you're a leader, people listen to you and they act on what you say. And very real people are getting hurt and getting killed because some people don't understand that. And that's a leadership failure, and we can't tolerate it.
I remember you talked to my colleague, Rachel Maddow, as the insurrection was going on. And I remember that day talking to former intelligence officials and national security officials who said this problem is radicalization on the right, and it needs to be dealt with on the right. When you see a vote of close to 200 members vote to not strip Marjorie Taylor Greene of her committee assignments, do you have confidence that the right can deal with extremism in its own ranks?
Well, they have to find a way to deal with it, because you're right. I mean, the extreme right doesn't want to hear what I have to say generally, right? I try to speak up against things and speak truth to power and call out lies when I see it. But it's going to be more important and more powerful for people that, identify with one another to call that out. And that's why it's really important, like the Adam Kinzingers of the world and others who are standing up and pushing back on that. That's a very powerful thing to do. And I am going to encourage more of my GOP colleagues to do it, because there has to be that pushback coming from their own side of the aisle. And until we see that, we're going to continue to see this tribalism, this division, these tensions fester.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank all of you out there.
Thank you as always.
Thanks to at home.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for letting us into your homes during these extraordinary times.